I'm a Holocaust survivor from Poland, and I survived 12 camps. I lived in a small town in Poland. My father was in business, and we had a very good life until 1939, when the Germans came into Poland. They divided Poland in two halves. One half was annexed to the Third Reich, to Germany. The second part was Poland under German occupation. We lived on the part where it was annexed to the Third Reich. And I'm sure most of you know, in Europe, every town has a town square, and that's where most of the business are. We lived in the town square, the second house in one corner of the square, and the third house was an uncle of mine. After a few weeks, they came to town, and they went past my uncle and around the square and told the people they have 10 minutes to get their possessions and get out in the middle of the square, and they took them away. For some reason, I'll never know why they left those three houses where we were the second house. Anyway, a rumor started right after this that they're going to come back 3 days later and take the rest of us. So my father had three sisters living about 25 kilometers before Warsaw, which were the second half of Poland. So that said, we're not going to wait for them to come and give us 10 minutes. So he got out and they rented, we had some deep wagon, horse-drawn wagon, 6-8 feet deep, and packed up most of the stuff from the store, and he put a few pieces of bedding on top, a couple pieces of furniture, because from our part to the other part you had to go through a border. So like you're moving. So my parents and one sister and brother, they left. I remained with two older sisters, and we were loading a second wagon. In the meantime, Polish people from around town were coming to town to buy anything they can get. So I sold them in a bicycle and a boat of shirt material. On the way home, he had to pass the police station, so he got stopped, and they want to know where did he get that material. They thought maybe you took the business people out and started to loot again. He said, I bought it, and show me a receipt. He said, I don't have a receipt. Then go bring the person who sold it to you. So he came back to me and he said, you have to come with me. If not, they're going to come here. So I went with him to the police station, and he asked me, did you sell him that? I said, yes. Why didn't you give him a receipt? I said, we in Poland, we didn't give receipts. So he took the boat of material, smacked the guy, and let him go, and let me go. And I went back, my sisters waited for me, and we took off with the second wagon. We went to a little town named Blonia, about 25 kilometers before Warsaw. We come there, their life was going on almost normal. The people were still in business, but everybody has to go to work. So being there for about 2 or 3 weeks, I went to my first camp in 1939. I went to a camp where we were building a canal. You stayed in the water up to the knee without boots. That was October, November. In Europe, this is almost winter time. But this camp was, you work during the week, on the weekend you can go home. So I was working there about 6 weeks, and I got blood poisoning. I was sores on my arms, on my legs. So I went home on the weekend, and I said, I'm not going back. So on Monday morning, the police came to look for me. So my dad said, he's not here, he's supposed to be in the camp. So I stayed away from home for a while, and that was the time when they started to build in Warsaw a wall where the Warsaw Ghetto was going to be. After they finished building the wall, they came out the order, all the Jews who lived within 50, 60 kilometers of the surrounding area of Warsaw had to move into the ghetto. So moving into the ghetto, you have no idea how miserable, how terrible it was, because the area they picked out was a small area, and you put in over 400,000 people. So people were dying every morning. You walked out, there were dead people on the streets, on the sidewalk, everywhere. So I lived in the ghetto for about 5 months, and we found out back home, since we left, nothing has changed. Everything remained the same. So my parents decided, for an older sister and a younger brother and I, we should go back home. So we go back home to get out of the ghetto, so we paid off the guard at the gate to get out. And we got out, and they said, my sister and brother would take one street, and I'll take another street, and we walk through town, and we meet on the outskirts of town. I walked for about 3 blocks, and I had a Polish teenager comes over, give me some money, or I'm going to report you. So I figured I gave him some money, I got rid of him, and I kept walking. But he got on the streetcar, rode the streetcar for a few blocks, and comes over again, give me some more money. So this time I gave him some more money, but I changed the street and I lost him. And I walked to the outskirts of town, and I met my sister and brother, and we went home. So came back, I say everything is, nothing has changed since we left. But I was free for 3 days. After being there 3 days, they came out to order all the Jewish men from 16 to 60, report to the schoolhouse. So I reported to the schoolhouse, and off I went to the camps. So the first camp I went to, we were building a dam. We were cutting down hills, and we had little electric cars. You fill them up, and they take them another place, and they dump it. But the work we were doing was very hard work, because we had to use picks to loosen up the ground so you could fill up those loads. And the food you were getting was a piece of bread like this in the morning, and a cup of coffee, and you went to work. You came back from work, you got a soup, or either from the peels from potatoes or spinach. That food you couldn't survive. The only way you could survive is we work with civilians. And if you manage to get just a little extra food, that's the only way you could survive. So actually I was in a camp, and they're in a city of Poznan. And there were camps in the city and around the city. So people were dying every morning. They took dead people out, and there were very few people left in this camp. And the same thing happened at the other camps, so they combined 2, 3 camps into one. And after a while, the same thing had happened at this camp. So I kept moving from camp to camp. After the first camp, I moved to another camp in the city. We were laying cobblestones on the street. And that lasted a short time. After this, I moved to a camp. I was a roofer. I was working the roofs, doing the roofs. And after that, I went to another camp. We were building sewers. We had big cement pipes put in on the ground. All these camps didn't last too long. Then I went to a camp. We were building an airport. I was laying a railroad track. After being in 7 camps, a train arrived, and it wasn't a passenger train. No, the cattle car train, where they put 30, 40 people to one boxcar. And the destination we were going takes 5, 6 hours at the most. But we were riding around for 3 days, no food, no water, no facilities. And we arrived in Auschwitz. Came to Auschwitz. There's a little town named Oswiecim. So the train stopped downtown, and they opened the doors from the train. 30, 40% of the people were dead on the train already. Whoever could walk, you walked out. We're lined up in rows of 5, and we met Dr. Joseph Mengele. He was called the Doctor of Death. he selected people for human experiment or the gas chamber. So Dr. Mengele said, there are 6 kilometers to walk to the camp. He's going to select people to go to the left. People on the left are going to be taken on trucks. So he went through and picked out sick people, old people, young kids. I was a little guy, so he picked me out too to go to the left. If I would come from home, I wouldn't know the difference. But I was already in 7 camps. In most of the camps I was, if I had to go to work, I tried to get in with the biggest, strongest man. And here I look around, I see sick people, old people. That's not the kind of people I like to be with. But my luck was, it was after midnight. It would have been daytime, I don't think I could have done it. So when Dr. Mengele moved further down, I ran back to the other side. If I didn't run back to the other side, I wouldn't be here talking to you tonight. Because the people on the left were taken on trucks, went straight to the gas chamber. So I went back to the other side, and I walked to Auschwitz, got a shower, and I came out of the shower, and I got a tattoo. No, I don't know, back there, maybe. It's okay, I got it. You can see, it's 142584. From that moment on, you had no name anymore. This was your name. So I got a tattoo, and then there's Auschwitz II called Birkenau. And I walked over to Birkenau. I was in Birkenau for about 6 months, and I saw Dr. Mengele 2 more times in Birkenau, but it was daytime, and I was far away from where he was. I got through. But the life in Birkenau, I saw people running to the electric fence to get electrocuted. I saw people being beaten to death because they gave up. So the life there that was the worst camp I was in. So after living there for about 6 months, and that was the time where the Warsaw Ghetto uprising was. That was in April of 1943. On Passover, there was the uprising at the Warsaw Ghetto. So after that, they said now they need a big transport, but they don't want to take any people from Poland. They only want the people from Hungary, Greek, Italy. But on the end, they were short about 300 people. So they said, now we'll take some people from Poland. So I had a report, and I was going back to the Warsaw Ghetto for the 2nd time. So the same thing going back, took us about 3 days to go back. No food, no water, nothing. We came back to the ghetto, there wasn't one house left. Just remaining walls. All the houses were burned out. Just remaining walls from the houses. And there was no camp, so they gave us some prefab. We had to put together our own barracks. And there was no facility. And our job was to take down those remaining walls brick by brick and clean them up and put up in stacks of 8-10 feet high. And then they had Polish people coming in with horse and wagon. They were taking them to the railroad station. They were sending them back to Germany. So in the meantime, before we had the facilities built and everything, the typhus broke out. Anybody who reported to the hospital, I never knew anybody who came out of the hospital. Typhus is a high temperature, high fever. I had that high fever, but I didn't report to the hospital. I had we called a capo, like a foreman, you know. He was a German middle-aged man, but he was also a prisoner. So he didn't care if we worked or he didn't work. When I had that temperature, I was sitting like this behind those stacks of bricks for about 3 days until I got over the temperature, and I went back to work. So I was working for a few days, And one night, the Polish underground attacked our camp. They tried to free us. But they were fighting all night, were unsuccessful. So the next morning, they took us out of the camp, and we had to jog to get out of the city. They said they were afraid that the underground may attack us in the city. So we had to jog to get out, and they put us up on a big field where the farmers graze their cows, and the ground is very moist. So put on that field, whatever means you have, a knife, a spoon, anything, you could dig up some mud, and you took the bottom of the shirt, you squeezed the mud to get a little water. So I got a little water, and then we were walking, come to the town, there was a river. So they let us go to the river to get some water. Two of our people went a little further into the river. I thought maybe they want to escape, get out on the other side. On the other side, they were shot, they were killed right in the river. So we got some water and we were walking. So come to the next town, was the same river. So they said this time only 100 people at a time can go to the river to get some water. So went to get some water, and then we were walking. And that day, very heavy rain was coming down. We were walking, you could hardly walk, you were soaking wet. You couldn't even walk until we arrived to an railroad station, and the same train arrived. And this time we were 3.5 days on the train with nothing, no food, no water, nothing. We went to Germany. Went to Germany to a camp named Dachau. Dachau was the first camp Hitler built in 1933 for political prisoners. Then he turned it into a concentration camp with a gas chamber. So I came to Dachau for about 2 weeks. I didn't do anything because they were establishing about 12 camps, all by number from 1 to 12, within 50, 60 kilometers in the surrounding area of Dachau. So I was sent first to camp number 1, and I was working for a farmer digging potatoes. That lasted about 3 weeks. Then I went to a city of Landsberg am Lech, about 50 kilometers from Dachau. And it was camp number 7. And camp number 7 was a small camp. Excuse me. A small camp with only about 250 people. But we came to camp number 7, we were a small group. We were in the camps over 4 years already. So we had the privilege of getting the better jobs. So friends of mine got the jobs in the kitchen. 3 of them were the police in the camp, and a couple, one was a carpenter and a medicine man. And this was the only camp I was. Women were in the same camp, but they were blocked off by wire fence 1/4 of the camp. But we went to work together. So I had a group with 10 of was 5 girls and 5 boys. And we worked in the kitchen for the German guards right outside of the camp. And in the kitchen there was 2 German men, middle-aged men, but they were very nice men. They were very good to me. Every day I was going back to the camp after work. I took some food back for my friends. And we also had some soup left over. So we had some big milk cans. I took a milk can, I put it in. The next morning, people were going to work. They had to pass by our kitchen. So I stopped them and I gave them some food. A couple of times, the officer in charge of the guard complained, I'm holding up the people going to work. So, but my people told me, don't worry, let them talk, do what you're doing. And that lasted for quite a few weeks. Actually, until April 28, all the 12 camps had to go back to Dachau. Stayed overnight, they put us out on a big field there, stayed overnight, and the next morning, what they called, we go on a death march. We're supposed to take us to the mountains in Germany. There's a ski resort named Garmisch, and that's where they're supposed to kill us. But we walked for 2 days, and we knew we were not going to be walking too far, because we could hear the fighting, so we knew that the American troops are not far behind us. So we walked about 2 days, and we crossed a little bridge. The little bridge was blown up. So our group was divided in 2 halves. I was in a half in a village named Königsdorf, and there was a little forest in the village. So they took us into the forest, and they asked for volunteers to take the sick people to put them into the farmers in the village, to the barn, and told the volunteers to come back. One of the volunteers was a friend of mine. On the way back, they found a dead horse in the snow, so they cut off some pieces from the horse, and my friend comes back with a little piece of meat and said, do something. Here is the one here on the right side. His name was Joe Buddha. That was a friend of mine. Came back with a piece of horse meat, so I made a fire and I was barbecuing. That was the best meal we had in a long time. And during the night, the guards disappeared. We didn't know until the next morning. The German police came and they took us into that village and they disappeared. So it was in the morning, about between 8, 9 o'clock. So we just walked around the village to see what's going to happen next. So until about between 12 and 1 o'clock, American tank moved in and we were liberated. And behind the tank were the American troops. So tried to block off the village not to let anybody out. But we were 9 of us. We were in the camps over 5 years. So we didn't want to get blocked in, so we broke through and started to walk to see where the next town is. We walked for about 1 or 2 kilometers. There was a bakery. So we went into the bakery and everybody got a bread. You were okay. You had a bread, you were okay. And we keep walking and we come to a town named Bartels. And we see 3 American soldiers walking. They were trying to walk. They were so drunk they couldn't walk. They were holding on to each other. They were Czechoslovakian descent. And so they asked, are you Polish? I told them, yes. Come on. So they took us in to an underground bunker. It was a warehouse. You couldn't see the end of it. Took us into that bunker, so everybody changed clothes. Everybody took a backpack and put some food in. And there was a big row of bicycles chained up. They broke the chain, everybody got a bicycle. Now we have to find a place to stay. So when the American troops came in behind that tank, they brought all the people to that same city. And it used to be a German Air Force base. So they made a DP camp, a displaced person camp. But we didn't want to go to the camp. We tried to get out. The city, you couldn't get out because it was after 6 o'clock, and 6 o'clock was curfew. So we hopped over about 3 or 4 fences, and we came to a German inn, but it was taken over by the American troops. And in the back of the inn was an empty house, so we took over the house. We moved into the house, and we lived in the house about 10 days. And they came on an order, anybody who lives outside of the camp has to move into the camp. So we moved into the camp and we were taken back to another DP camp in Munich. But you are free. You could live at the camp or you can go any place you want. So I lived in the camp for 3 days, and then a few friends of mine and we decided to go back to the city of Landsberg, where camp number 7 was. And at that time, there were a lot of DP camps in Germany. Landsberg was one of the largest. So I went back to Landsberg and went to the camp and registered. They gave me a room. I stayed overnight, and next morning I moved out 7 kilometers from town to a farm, and I lived in a farmhouse. The reason we went to register to the camp, I didn't want to live in the camp, but we went to a lot of camps. We went to all the camps to register in case any of your family survived. Because when I got out of the Warsaw Ghetto, I left in the Warsaw Ghetto my parents, 2 sisters and 1 brother. So that's why I went to register. Everybody went through to check the list if anybody survived. So I lived in a farm for about 6 weeks, and I decided to go back to Poland, to my hometown, to go to my house to see if any of my family survived. So I came to the house, and I had survivors living on the 2nd floor of my house. On the 1st floor were Polish people, but they said no immediate family came back, nobody. The only one that came back was a cousin of mine. We were separated when Dr. Mengele told me to go to the left when we came to Auschwitz. I was with him and 2 of his uncles, his father's brothers. And he is the only one who survived, and that's him here on the left here. His name was Mark Alexander. We had the same last name. So he survived, but he's in a different town. And at that time, it was very bad for survivors who came back. They killed a lot of survivors in Poland. In one town, they killed 42 survivors, city named Kielce. Because when they took the Jews out of the homes, they moved in. And now some of the survivors are coming back. They didn't want to give up the homes. They were killing a lot of survivors. So the Polish people who lived on 1st floor asked me if I'm going to stay, they'll move out. So I told them, don't bother. I'm not staying. So I went and I got my cousin and we went back to Germany. And I lived in Germany for 4 more years because you couldn't go any place. I didn't have a passport. So I had to wait until some country opens up. So after 4 years, Canada said they were going to take some people. So I went and registered, and then you have to wait until they call you. It took a long time, I didn't hear from them. In the meantime, a friend of mine lived in the next village said, now you can go to Munich and register to go to America. So I went, I registered, and it took about 2 weeks. I got a notice to go get checked out by the American doctor and then the FBI to check you out. And then I got a note to go to the port, which is a German port, Bremenhaven, where the boat was, and to get the boat to come to America. So I came to America in May 30, 1949. So I came to America. You came to America, you go to New York, and everybody had to have a sponsor. Either you have relatives here or an organization to sponsor you. So I didn't have any relative here. I was sponsored by a Jewish organization named Joint. So my contract was Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. So I went to Harrisburg, and I got a job for a man who had a cleaning store and a tuxedo rental. I got a job as a tailor because my grandfather and my father were all tailors. So I got a job, and the man I worked for there, his name was Max Kaplan. A father couldn't be better than this man was. So I was there for 6 months, and the cousin who survived, he had an uncle here in Santa Monica. So he came in October and told the uncle that I'm in Pennsylvania. So the uncle called me a few times I should come here so we can be together, because we were the only 2 survivors from both of our families. So I came here to Los Angeles, and here I'm still in Los Angeles. And before we go further, I witnessed 3 hangings. People trying to escape, and they got cut. And on Sunday, we had to gather around watching being hung. I had to watch 3 times of that. So now, if you have any questions for me, I'll be happy to answer you.
How old were you back then?
16.
How old were you when you were liberated?
21. And before this, let me show you something. Here, there's a pictures the way we lived in the camps. All the camps were the same, like shelves. In one section for 3 people. And on the second row bottom here, on the end here, you know, Elie Wiesel. You know? That's him right here on the second row on the end. What was it? Oh, this way. This one.
Where did you get that picture?
This picture, I got it from actually through my museum, from the museum.
It's a pretty famous picture. In fact,
Yeah.
Where it just speaks at the museum, the Holocaust Museum in LA in town. Can you hear me?
No.
It's a pretty famous picture. So they have a big blow-up of it on the wall at the museum where Joe speaks when he's in town at the museum. It's called Holocaust Museum LA, and I don't know if you're familiar with the Grove.
Yeah.
It's on the other
Right
side,
back of the
it's
Grove.
in the park on the other side, very subtle. So they have a big blow up of it, and yeah, that was Elie Wiesel. He was in a camp.
This is in some of the camps. These are the uniforms we were wearing.
Who took the pictures? Was it like the Red Cross coming or was
This year, these pictures were taken actually the American troop
because they look happy?
when they liberated the camp.
That's right. Yeah, that makes sense. But,
And
did you
here I have shown 1, 2, 3. This is a document from liberation from Dachau. And here is one from Auschwitz. On the bottom here, you see, there's my tattoo.
That's your picture on the corner?
Yes,
they gave that to you when you left?
after I was liberated. And there's one from Munich, and on this one here, it shows you I was in the camp from 1939 to May 2nd, 1945.
What do you think, why you survived? What was your main, if you had to say anything? Because most people did not survive.
Why? Because I survived because I always managed to get a little extra food. You know? Like for instance, when I was in Birkenau, Auschwitz-Birkenau, I was walking around, we walked around from barrack to barrack, and I met a man I knew from home, my hometown. And he actually got married, moved to the next town, and then I met him there. He says to me, you know what, Joe, I'm doing some tailoring for a couple. Why don't you come and help me? So I went to help him, so I had some extra food. Because the couples, they got, every barrack, we had in the barracks were about 200 people. And all the food came to the couple, and he distributed the food. So for him, this way I got the extra food from there. In almost all the camps, all there was, I always managed to get a little extra food. That's the only way I survived, and I was good enough to work.
So do you remember some of the people that you were in the camps with that did not survive?
That did not survive. Of course, lots of them. I know a lot of them, because especially I was the first couple of camps, I was people from my hometown with the people. And actually my hometown, I come from a little town, the population was 6,000, a small town, 25% was Jewish. And the only one I heard, no, about 13 of us survived. But right today, I think they're all gone. There's nobody around still. I had a few friends still, but they're all gone.
At 16, were you were you a very observant Jewish, observe all the Jewish traditions and
No, we didn't. You couldn't survive. You couldn't. You had no means. We knew all the holidays. We knew the holidays.
Could you pray? Could you say some of the
Pray. We didn't have any books, anything to pray with.
Did you start to lose faith in God in the camp?
Yeah, no. I still believed in God. You know, like for instance, I tell you, I spoke to about hundreds of thousands, I think, high school students, middle schools, high schools. And a lot of them, when I tell them that I saw people going to the electric fence to get electrocuted or being beaten to death because they gave up. So a lot of them ask me, did you ever think of giving up? I said, no, I never thought of giving up. I never lost faith and never stopped believing in God. And I said, I may have a bad day today, but I hope tomorrow it will be a better day. But never give up.
Can I point out one thing? I just read in the Siddur, I think it's actually today, there are 12 gates to heaven. I think you went through all 12 of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
What was the first indication in your life that something was amiss? Something was not right? Something was not like it always was? What was the first feeling and moment where you realized that life was changing for the Jewish people and maybe not the non-Jews?
Well, the first thing was when I went to the first camp already, I knew it was something, it wasn't right. That something was wrong. I was a slave already.
Like as a child, when you, I mean, it must have crept up. I mean, all the restrictions were little by little, and then all of a sudden it hit a crescendo, I would imagine. Like, maybe you weren't aware because you were young and your parents knew, but you were sheltered from it probably.
Well, actually, I would say the first camp I went, like you say, maybe I knew something was wrong, but I don't think I realized how bad it was, because I was working, I could go on the weekend, you could go home. So it's bad, but not bad enough. Until after I went back, I got out of the Warsaw Ghetto and went back home and went to the camp when it started to build the dam. That's when it hits you the most. Then there's no freedom of anything.
You mentioned your father, your brother, and your sister. Where was your mother?
Mother too, my father and mother. I left both, father, mother, 2 sisters, and 1 brother in the Warsaw Ghetto.
So the last time you saw them
Yeah.
was in the Warsaw Ghetto?
Yes, when I got out of the Warsaw Ghetto. And I got out with a sister and brother. I said when I came home, 3 days later, I went to the camp. After I went to the camp, and about a couple of weeks later, the sister and brother, they were taken to a ghetto, a lodge ghetto. And the only thing I know is when I was in the first camp, I got a letter from my sister that they took my brother. He was 12 years old. And they took him, and at that time, they didn't have the gas chambers yet. They were gassing people on trucks. They were on wood, and putting the fumes inside the trucks. And he was taken to a camp named Chelmna. That's the only thing I know what happened to him. But the rest of the family, nothing. I don't know. I can't take anything. Matter of fact, I worked with the American Red Cross here last year and giving him all details, never to find out nothing. Can't find nothing.
We have one question in the back.
I think, working. My father was also a survivor. So I thank you for your time and your story. It's interesting, I don't know if this is working. It's very interesting, the more distance we get away from the Holocaust, that people aren't talking about it anymore. It's almost becoming forgotten. So your voice is echoing throughout this room, and we will continue to tell this story. My father, as a lot of survivors they didn't discuss it at all. Right?
Yes, that's true.
And so I just want to thank you for your time and for your story, sharing it with us, and hopefully we can continue to share it beyond tonight. So thank you for that.
Because there are only a few survivors left, not too many left. And we have to talk for 6 million who were murdered. They were only murdered because they were criminals or did anything wrong just because they were Jews. And today, we still have anti-Semitism going on and Holocaust deniers. So when I talk to the high school kids, I tell them, you hear the Holocaust deniers, I call them crazy. They're crazy because the evidence is still in existence today. You go to any of the camps, Auschwitz, Dachau, Majdanek, Treblinka, the ovens are still there, and we've been back, and you see buses coming every day, people from all over the world coming to witness this. So that's why I call the Holocaust denier, I tell them they're crazy. Don't listen what they tell you. Yes?
Were you ever able to have a relationship when you got to LA? Did you get married?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Yes, and I have a daughter and a son.
I just have a short question, and I thank you for sharing your story with us. I'm just curious to know if you've had many opportunities to share it with other audiences that might not be as receptive or credible to your story.
I was in 2015. I was in Dachau, and people know who this is. I was talking to Angela Merkel. Yeah, I talked to her in Dachau in 2015, and we were just back in May, this last May, again celebrating 78 years of the liberation of Dachau. I think this mic. Okay, yeah. So we just came back from Dachau, and I was talking to a lot of people there. I was talking first in Dachau now to about 2,000 people, and I speaking in English, and I had an interpreter. And I talked to a lot of schools there. They bring schools to the camp. So no.
If you have one message to those children, the younger children, what is it?
Well, the only thing, the younger children is education. Through what we can do is stop all this anti-Semitism is through education. Because the youngest high school students, they are our future. is they're the one, because I was told 70% of those kids in the high schools I talked to never heard about the Holocaust. So that's what our view is, what we have to talk as many as we can to the high school students.
Amen.
Did you think about writing a book of your life?
No, I haven't. But I have a little book. Some kids wrote it for me. There's a school. Yeah. Here. It's called in Los Angeles. There's a school called the Otis Design Center. They wrote a little book like this for me, which has got a lot of pictures in and everything. I don't know if you can see it here. I spoke to them about 5 weeks every Monday, and they put together this book. And on this book, you know, you see what it says in the front here. Can you see?
It says, do you believe in luck, Joe?
Look at the back.
And he answers, no, I believe in God.
What kind of business did you have here in Los Angeles?
I had a store on Melrose called Los Angeles Uniform Exchange. We were selling military uniforms.
Current or old uniforms?
Both. And we supplied most of the movies you saw, uniform movies. The uniforms came from our store. Most of the big movies. Top Gun.
So you were a prop master.
Maybe some of the younger, maybe some of you want to ask the question, some of the younger.
What did you do in Germany for the 4 years that you were there after the war?
What I was doing in Germany for a year after the war? Black market. Why? I was doing, what do I do? What did I do? To go to a Germans to give me a job? So I had to make a living. And I did very good.
In Ojai, we used to have regular busing program for middle school. And they would take them down to the Holocaust Museum. It no longer exists. Does anybody have any clue why not? It used to be very effective.
Did you say the museum doesn't exist, or the schools? The program does. Oh. Well, that's too bad.
They didn't have funding for the schools.
That's too bad. Well, actually, also, you know, I was told that only 17 states teaches Holocaust. And we were trying to get all the states to make it mandatory. Because some of the states who have, like for instance, I know somebody in Tennessee. He is the director, I think.
They have
a formal commission.
on the Holocaust. And actually, they found Joe on the internet through YouTube and all that at just before the lockdown. And Joe was Zooming with them, and what they would do twice a year. And what they would do was hook it up so while Joe spoke, it reached 31 districts. Wow, that's immense at one time. And that's what they do. And now that things are lifted, they invited Joe to come out there in person. So we'll be doing that in the next few weeks.
Now we're going to Tennessee.
When did you first think about this idea that I want to publicly talk to people? How old were you when you first said to yourself, I want to...
Well, the first time I talked to was in 1997. I had a friend living in Culver City. He belonged to called the Exchange Club. Was mixed Jews and Gentiles. And they met every Tuesday for lunch. So one day he said, Joe, why don't you come with me to lunch? And I went to him, and then he told me, he said, why don't you tell him about you? So that was the first time I spoke. And then I had a neighbor. She used to teach Holocaust study at the synagogue on the synagogue, Temple Bet Am. And so she told me to come to talk to her students. And everything go on. Then one day I get a call from a friend, somebody who was the member of the Holocaust Museum LA, which I talk now quite often. A member called me, said, Joe, why don't you come and talk at the museum? And that was about 5 years ago, and I'm still talking at the museum. Matter of fact, they shown this coming Tuesday. They're showing a script, what is it, a little film actually.
What it is they sent down a crew from Germany last summer, not this summer. They sent out...
No, they sent out a crew from Berlin to interview me and take a lot of pictures. And they're trying actually to restore the one I was the last camp number 7 in Landsberg, make it a monument. So because I was there, so they came and I made pictures, interviews, and now Tuesday they're going to show it at the museum. So everybody is invited. At 6:30.
I heard something about YouTube. Can we look up, are there videos that we could, do you have a channel?
No, if you, it's on, if you just, one of the best ways, you just go to YouTube and put in Joseph Alexander Survivor. Everything's going on.
Thank you.
You'd be surprised.
Yes.
It's almost everybody, whatever they do, they post there. So that would probably be your best.
Thank you.
Okay, wait, Reva.
After all that you've been through, do you carry a level of skepticism towards governments?
Government? I don't talk politics.
But to have skepticism, because I think sometimes when they hide the truth about the Holocaust, they're trying to hide the fact that a government could do such an atrocity when sometimes things are happening behind closed doors and we have to all be skeptic and do our homework.
Well, so that's why I talk as many people I can want to listen. And so I've been booked up actually. I mean, I have already booked the occasion until next May even. I have for next May. I have already for next May to go to Arizona for Yom HaShoah.
He's actually booked up until next May. Lots of stuff. Can't hear you.
He's booked until next May.
We have to go to South Dakota, we're going. And then to Pennsylvania. Yes.
Go ahead.
Joe, as a child of survivors, who didn't share their story, I'm incredibly grateful to you for being here and speaking. And my question is, are you observant with your faith today? Do you go to synagogue? Do you practice Judaism today?
Are you religious today? Are you observant?
Yes.
Still
Yes.
today? What is your schedule?
You know, I belong to a synagogue in Los Angeles, the Hollywood Temple Bethel, and I'm the gabbai. So I think that should answer you that.
Did you come from an Orthodox family?
Yes.
Joe, can you tell them what you told me? What was in your house? We're very similar.
Yeah. We had a synagogue in our house. Here, I'll show you a picture. Where is it? Here? Yeah. See, here's a picture from a group, what they called Gemilas Chesed Castle in Jewish. It's a group where we're making free loans to poor people. So they rented a room in our house, and they met once a month for about 3-4 hours, and the rest of the time was empty, so my dad made a synagogue, and we had services in our house. See? See there? See that? There's the group. And there's my father right in here. This one.
His father's beard is a little longer than mine.
No.
A lot whiter.
No, this was my father. This was the K, was the captain, and he was also a moil in the kosher, what do you call it, a shochet. When they were slaughtering the cows.
Rabbi Morty, where did you get that picture? Wasn't everything
I got some from some friends after the war. I don't know, because I had some friends who were on Polish papers. You know, were hiding.
Some friends of Polish papers able to go and
Yeah.
just research.
So that's where they got some pictures.
You have a picture of your mother also?
No.
And no picture of your brother or sister?
One sister.
You do.
I have one picture of one sister. I got it the same way as like this here. There's a picture of one of my sisters, and next to her, that's my father, which this picture was taken out of this, from this picture. So that's the only picture I have.
And you carry it with you all the time? And you carry it with you all the time?
Yeah, you can see it's in my wallet. That's right.
So beautiful.
Lisa. Wow.
Well, I have a few questions, but the first one is like to go through that, everything that you've gone through. What, after you were liberated, like in all these years, you have such a good attitude towards life, and like what tools, or what was it that, you know, helped along the way of all these years?
Because you know why? I don't carry a grudge. Because I say when you carry a grudge, you make yourself sick and it doesn't help anything. So that's why I don't carry a grudge.
So you had no anger at the Germans after the war?
I have yes, I do have anger, but what can I do about it? There's nothing I can do. Of course I have anger, but there's nothing I can do about it.
What did you do with that anger?
I just let it go. Because there's nothing I can do about it. And actually today, it's a different Germany today. Completely different.
In what way?
In a good way. Yeah, they're very close to Israel. They help a lot Israel, they help a lot of Israel. And the people itself today, we've met a lot of people who go to Israel all the time. Matter of fact, the first time we went there, 2015, I think it was, and I was talking, and then I see a woman was wearing earrings. It said "Hi" on it. So I said, "Where did you get this?" She said, "I just came back from Israel."
Also, like for younger generations now, that either are, you know, I've heard different things from younger people, they're less, you know, not everyone, but some might not believe in God or whatever it is. So what message can we give them from surviving the Holocaust, that it is so important that they can carry on these stories to younger generations that maybe are not as religious or not religious? But what message would you carry on, like, if they say, well, why would the Holocaust happen if there's a God? Why would God allow that? Like, what messages can we give to young people asking these types of questions?
Why God did it happen? You know, I say God works in mysterious ways. God works in mysterious ways. So we can't question God, what He does. Thank you very much. Thank everybody for coming.